My name is Andrea, and this is my final for theology. Question 1. What have I learned? What I have learned from this class is the importance of self-awareness. Pain is inevitable, and it is easy to blame others for our misfortunes, especially when they have caused that pain. However, that only leaves us bitter, sad, and enraged. This ultimately leads to a cease in emotional growth towards maturity and happiness. We do ourselves a disservice by allowing pain to amount to prolonged suffering. In perspective, life is too short to not attempt to seek happiness. It is difficult to explain why certain things happen, especially when bad things happen to good people. However, if I am to take anything away from this class, it's the importance of self-awareness and the power of inner strength. Question 2. What experiences and expressions of suffering have I witnessed? As a physical therapist assistant working in a subacute rehabilitation center, I have witnessed others suffering, both physical and emotional. Physical suffering as in pre-existing and current medical ailments, as well as the psychological effects of these ailments. Being a patient is a vulnerable experience requiring someone to seek assistance from strangers for things that they once did not need help. Sometimes the suffering is portrayed through changes in personality, negatively impacting their actions. One must attempt to understand that grief and suffering is portrayed in several different ways, including negative behaviors towards caregivers. I do not know everything about my patients' past that may make them act out in a certain way. I must try and keep a perspective that being a patient means losing much of the independence that we as humans crave. I must be patient, understanding, and empathetic to this drastic change in environment. Question 3. What insights have I gained into root causes of suffering and sources of hope? Suffering is a current state of undergoing pain. Causes of suffering vary from minor to major. Some causes of pain could be physical injury, a death of a loved one, experiencing abuse, etc., which can turn into suffering. I believe that all suffering can provide value for growth if the individual is willing to seek its significance. At the end of the day, happiness is an ultimate gift. Pain is inevitable and may cause an individual to suffer. This suffering can lead to grief, bitterness, and anger. With the belief that everyone deserves happiness and peace, seeking value in suffering can assist with prevailing past the experience or experiences. The idea that happiness is achievable is a source of hope and should be sought. Question 4. How this informs my own understanding of my gifts and vision of my role in the world of suffering and hope. How I personally view suffering is the product of prolonged pain caused by an outcome of an undesirable situation, whether it's self-inflicted or not. I cannot imagine some of the suffering endured by many individuals of this world, since I have not experienced all the negativities. I do not want to sound as if I am justifying the undeserved evils some have endured, or as though I am making light of the situation. My personal opinion on suffering is that there can always be a value if one is ready to seek it. This value can be as simple as survival of this ordeal has made me stronger. What I mean by seeking value is ultimately establishing hope that there is happiness to be found. To have suffering is to live a life of pain, sadness, and rage. To seek value in the suffering is to live a life of hope that can be better than these circumstances. As an example, my father recently asked me how my classes were going, and I explained the premise of this class in particular. My father is not a religious individual and seems to have grown a disliking to God recently due to unfortunate circumstances. As he was expressing his negativities surrounding my grandfather's death, which happened only a few months ago, he expressed his opinion on how death is the end and that his father is simply in the ground without life. He began to state how God allows suffering in this world, and he began to cry and stated how unjust God was. I am not a religious individual, nor do I pretend to be. I told him that thinking like this is clearly only causing you pain, and how I get past my grandfather's death is feeling that he is now reunited with my grandmother. He expressed how he wished he could feel this way, however can't get past the injustice of the world. I told him I cannot explain why bad things happen to good people, nor do I find it fair to attempt to. All I know is at the end of the day we all deserve happiness, and we need to advocate for our own happiness If someone is enduring suffering, attempt to seek value or new perspective. Getting bitter and angry and upset about the injustice of the world will only leave you bitter, angry, and upset. We only hurt ourselves when we dwell negatively on the complexities of the world. We deserve happiness, however, we must seek it through positive thought and hope. Question 5. Integrate specific insights from biblical and theological exploration in class. Redemptive suffering and Jesus as a suffering servant are habitual themes in biblical study. As stated in Isaiah, surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. Jesus is viewed as the suffering servant due to his suffering endured through the crucifixion for the sins of others. This act of suffering falls under the realm of redemptive suffering due to the positivity for others that followed his crucifixion, such as our mended relationship between God and his children. As stated in Peter, but if you should suffer for what is right, you are blessed. Do not fear their threats. Do not be frightened. Undeserved suffering, endured to allot for positive outcomes for others, is redemptive suffering. We must not be afraid of redemptive suffering, however, embrace it to assist others positively. I may not consider myself religious, however, through analysis of this semester, I have come to a newfound appreciation for the concept of religion and its ability to assist in the healing process. Seeking religion can assist with the healing process through attempting to understand why the suffering may have occurred. I truly wanted to thank you. This class has allowed me to see the world through a new perspective. I've had my own personal sufferings that I've been dealing with for a few years now, and allowed the suffering to negatively impact my life, both mentally and physically. These past years have left me bitter, depressed, and anxious. I blamed others for my unhappiness, and all it does is cause me unhappiness. Through this newfound understanding, I have recently sought out speaking with somebody to assist me with overcoming my past and current situation. Thank you for your time.